Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's Munch and Learn. I'm Sarah Lorenz, the Special Events Manager at the Dixon Gallery and Gardens, and we have a few reminders before we jump into the talk. We are recording this session. If you would like to rewatch it or share it with friends or find any other edition of Munch and Learn, you're welcome to do that on the Dixon's YouTube channel. And since we're recording, we do ask for everyone to remain on mute the entire time. And if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. After Brittney's presentation, we will go over them and she will answer all of them for us. Now I would like to introduce Brittney Bullock, who is one of the artists in our current exhibition called Memphis 2021. Brittney is a visual artist working in textile, mixed media, and abstraction. She's worked as the project manager for the Urban Art Commission, managing Memphis's largest public art archive, and as the partnerships and community engagement manager for Crosstown Concourse and Crosstown Arts, overseeing various collaborative creative programs and exhibitions. She's now the director of youth programs for the Memphis Music Initiative, helping build sustainable relationships with Memphis youth while implementing youth-led and youth-driven programs. Her interests in community engagement and social change have led her to an art practice that invites her and artists to redefine why they create, how they create, and for what purposes. Brittney's work often poses questions to the viewer, inviting us to reimagine materials, time, and physical space. Brittney, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And just deep gratitude to the Dixon for all of the graciousness and the generosity that they have shown me over the past couple of months, or actually a year, because the show was supposed to open last year, but then everybody knows what happened. So just deep gratitude to the Dixon and the work that they do in helping to lift local artists here in the city. Thank you. So I'm excited to be here. Naturally a bit nervous, but I'm here. I'm showing up. And so my hope today is to share a little bit about who I am as an artist, what I think about the conversations I want to have with people like you, and we'll leave it open for questions at the end. But really, my hope is just to share. So I have PowerPoint for us all. So as I thought about today and what I might want to offer, I kind of sat with, okay, Brittney, what do you care about, right? What concerns you? What do you want to be in conversation about, right? What dialogues are you having not only with yourself, but you want to have in a broader context? And so I'm taking these questions that often help to guide my work, and I'm going to use those to help guide this conversation. So if at any point there are questions that you might have, please hold them and we will be in conversation, because that's the good part, right? When we're actually able to converse with one another and be in dialogue. So I'm really excited about that. So what am I concerned about? Several things. I am concerned about the psychology of our human existence, particularly what happens to the psyche as we think about generational trauma and internalized oppression, particularly for Black and Brown folks. I'm concerned about consumerism and the capitalism paradox and environmental justice. I am concerned about my 2-year-old son and the men in my life who oftentimes are deemed a certain way, or their joy is stripped from who they are based on what they look like. So there are a lot of things that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about stories in Memphis and the history of Memphis and the people here and the environment and the land here. And so what I like to do is just kind of open up my concerns to you and be in conversation with you around how my art also responds to these concerns. Let's see. I cannot advance. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Cool. So first, I wanted to offer the work that I was going to show before my exhibition today. So I'm sure many of you know that I was scheduled to show my work last year around this time, and of course, our world stopped. And so there was a body of work that I had created that I had planned to show and couldn't. And again, the graciousness of the Dixon and the generosity, you know, they were like, but hold on, you know, there may be something that we can do in the future. And so I thought, cool, like if something can happen in the future, that's great. But if not, I'm going to continue to kind of explore what's happening here for me. And so this body of work really was all about the idea of surrendering and what it might mean to surrender, and the many forms that even the lifting of hands take, right? And the messages and the symbolism that comes with that. So that body of work was really all about this notion of what it means to raise your hands or lift your hands, whether that be to say, you know what, I give up, or don't shoot, or I'll give it to God, or praise and worship, right? All these different, or even in dances, right? I studied a lot of like ballet moves and always the lifting of hands. And so I really wanted to kind of look into this idea. So that was my direction. Um, you know, I was also really just thinking about what it means to surrender against your will, right? So I'm grappling with this idea because I'm also at this particular time in my journey, I'm thinking about what it might mean for myself, right, to surrender in various ways, right? Um, and so I really wanted to put that back to the viewer. And this particular work was really about layering, as all my work is, but I was really kind of focused on making these monoprints um, and collaging on top of those. And then I wanted to think about what it might mean to bring in the fiber aspect of my work and the sewing of my work and what that might look like on the work. And so the idea of incorporating stitching in these pieces really was for me to kind of offer this idea of a stitch, right? And how strong a stitch is, but also fragile, right? It was like these binaries, so to speak, or dichotomies. And I really wanted to explore like what stitching meant and the fact that it appears to be strong, but if you pull it at the right tension point, it'll all fall apart, right? And so I was thinking about this idea in my personal journey of how I looked put together, but at any moment you can pull a stitch and I would all fall apart. And so I was concerned about that, right? Last year, like it was top of mind. I wanted to push that. I wanted to be in conversation around that. And then the pandemic happened and we all had to surrender, right? We had to surrender, you know, everything, right? How we engaged one another physically, how we, you know, lived our lives. And so that became very true, not only for me, but for the world. And I thought, that's kismet, right? How special is that? And so when I thought about this idea of, okay, you know, there's going to be an opportunity for me to still show this work, I thought, well, no, I can't show that. I can't show it anymore. I'm at a different place. Like things are happening around the world. You know, what does it even mean for us to all be in isolation? And then, you know, the racial upheaval in our country, which, you know, was not new, right? It had always been tension. And so I was thinking about that too. And so here we are in 2020, and we're all in our homes. We're all engaging with our loved ones, and I think real radical ways, right? Where we are all kind of, forced to be in the same space, and we're forced to, in my opinion, be in relationship and dialogue, right? Whereas before you could essentially kind of avoid folks, but now it's like, no, we're here, we're in this space. And so I'm thinking about at this point, right? Um, what does it mean to be in right relationship with people? What does it mean to be able to hold joy and rage, right? And so I'm thinking about this because the murder of George Floyd had just happened, and obviously I'm outraged, and many others, and that sparked, I think, a level of introspection just around, like, what does it mean not only for me in this particular moment, but also for my son and or my husband, right? The men in my life, my uncles, right? My brothers. And so that then sparked this idea of what does it mean for me to hold joy and rage, and how has generations before me done that? How have we been able to do that? Which we have, right? And so I began to make these small 8x8 pieces. And it was really about making one every day. And I really wanted to kind of capture the essence of who we are as young people, the memorabilia that we engage with as young people, the just the joy that we often have as young people, and what happens to us as we get older, right? What strips our joy. And so I wanted to create these really joyful, inspired pieces. And so I created these 8x8 pieces, and I would make one every day. I would give myself a color palette. And then I would arrange on my art table all these different types of materials, and they would range from old tissue paper from gifts that I had received to stickers that I use with my son when he does a great job, to foil, to I even use hair grease and sponge rollers, right? And so all of these things that reminded me of being a child. And so I laid all these things out, and I went to work, and I kept making them. I kept making them over time. And then I thought, these are really bringing me a lot of joy. And what would it look like if I could actually offer these pieces to other people during this time? And so that question and concern came up for me. And it happened right on time, because there was also an opportunity for me to partner with another organization here in the city who was offering funds for artists to make work during the pandemic. And so I was able to apply for that and received funding. And I made a series of this work and was able to give it away, particularly give it away to Black and Brown people who felt like they needed a bit of joy during the pandemic. And so that started a different, I think, what became a ritual in my studio, this intentional way of making that was really geared toward a repetitiveness, but also attention to detail and intentionality, became a body of work. And that's usually what happens, right? It's the beauty of being in your studio, right? Is that you get into this habit and routine of making things, and then before you know it, you have a new body of work that really inspires you. And so I kept making them. I would simplify them. I would change the story, right? And these images that I'm pulling from are from various magazine clippings, really from like older things. So I have a really great collection of ebony magazines from the 30s to the 60s, and I pull a lot of imagery from there. I also pull a lot of imagery from photojournalists and movie posters. So I'm really gathering images, materials, to then share a story, so to speak, and create a story. So, I went from one extreme to the other. I thought, what would it look like to really um, kind of dial in on an image with materials, but then what would it also look like to pull back? And so um, I'm having this conversation, right, between the materials and the work and the stories. And so it was at this moment, right, last year, where I was like, this is the kind of work I want to make, right? This is how I want to really kind of push my current collage making practice into a different realm. And so this was the start of that. So I kept making things. I kept sourcing materials. Here, I use everything from Brillo pads to whatever I can find, really. I'm interested in it, right? And I'm really interested in reimagining space. And for me, it is a lot about like world building, being able to like build these different environments, so to speak. But I'm also interested in the idea of consumption and what it means to overconsume, what it means to hoard, both tangible and intangible things. And so I'm looking at that and kind of grappling with that as well, right? And I'm also grappling with this idea of how we as human beings are in this like capitalism cyclical orbit thing, right? So how are you able to like exist in this space, but also create a world for yourself that is the antithesis of that, right? So all of these things are floating. And then I'm also thinking about just what it means to have a child, right? To have a young person in my space, to know that like many of us, he might grow up and joy might leave him, right? Or he might be deemed one way based on what he looks like. And so I'm pulling all of these things in, and I'm making work about them. And so I'm having conversations with myself in the work, and I'm hoping that as I'm creating this work, that people will then start to ask, what's happening here? And so as I'm thinking about the year progressing and what's happening in our society, I'm still holding the notion of joy and rage, right? And so for me, one way that you can kind of, play with color and the psychology of color is by using brightly colored things. And so I really wanted to kind of look at how that translates to this idea of joy. So I'm showing you these two images here because I also want to talk to you about the process here and how, again, my process was still transforming, so to speak, or transcending. And so the image on the left, both of these images are in the show right now. But the image on the left is really kind of where I was in 2020, had decided to like scratch all of the work from 2019 and make new work. And I was here and really still wanting to push it. I wanted to push the medium in which I was working in. And in the past, I've used my sewing machine very, unconventionally. I would sew portraits with my sewing machine and and I taught myself how to sew. So it was really kind of like a free for all. And so it was at this moment where I was like, I really want to bring my sewing machine back into the work in a real intentional way. And so I started to think about material. I started to think about fiber and fabric, and I started to work on muslin. So the image on the right is where I'm kind of pulling more of the textile and the fiber work into the process itself. And so I really, enjoy that process of layering. It brought, I think, a different dimension and level to the work. And I think it was a really great, like, transitional moment for me um, in material. So I kept it going, right? I was like, well, all right, well, what can I not do? That's usually the question in my studio. Like nothing is off limits. Everything is fair game. And so I start to pull in more fabric, um, modeling paste, ribbon, interfacing, wallpaper, pattern paper. Like everything was at my fingertips. And um, I went for it, right? I went for it. And so, as you can see, my work has always been brightly colored. It's always been color. I'm really attracted to color and the psychology of color and what it means to use certain colors. But I also, in my research, have learned that oftentimes we gravitate toward a certain color based on our childhood experiences, right? And you know, I was born in the late 80s, grew up in the 90s, and it was nothing but bright colors, in my opinion, in the 90s, a bunch of bright tracksuits and, and you know, brightly colored everything. And so I think maybe that's why I naturally gravitate to these colors. But there's also something very interesting to me too, around the psychology of that. So a little bit about my process. It's very systematic. Rarely do I go into my studio and prepare to work and there's not a system, right? There's not a step-by-step thing that I have to do. I'm very linear in that way. I'm a linear thinker. And so often my process requires specific steps. The first step would be that I gather, right? So often I'm reading and I'm being inspired by literature, or I'm inspired by an image. And it starts there. And then I start to gather materials and it becomes a glossary, so to speak. And so that glossary then becomes like this, like, if you can imagine, like huge box or table of things. And then from there, I start to cull out the pieces that I want to include in this story. And sometimes it's a retelling of story. And then other times it's a story that I'm having within myself that I want to share. But there's always a story. And so for the work in the show now, that story, as I mentioned, is about joy and rage and how do you hold both. And so this is like a kind of like a layering image, kind of how I start and how the work transforms completely, and will continue to transform over time. It's really about putting things down, picking them up, sewing them down, cutting them off, right? It's really about this deconstruction of space, of material and time, and then a reconstruction of those things. And that's the fun part for me. It's also a bit daunting at times too, because if I don't take images, sometimes I lose. I'm like, you know, I'm on the 9th layer and I'm like, layer 3 was great, but I can't remember what layer 3 was. And so it's just part of the process and it becomes fun for that reason. But layering is really important to me. And I like to think of my work as a ritual, as I mentioned before. And so very specific things take place in my studio before I begin creating. Oftentimes, there's always a journal. And before I start to make the work, I journal for about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm usually looking at the last thing I made. I'm looking at the elements of the work. I'm looking at the layers, the composition, and I'm journaling for 3 to 5 minutes around whatever comes to mind. Usually it is, you know, how I feel personally about the work. Sometimes it's about the technique. Other times it's like how what's happening globally helps to inform it. But there's always a level of journaling. And so I start there. I get into my glossary and I build from there. This is real life, real life images of my studio and me like thinking through the process, right? These pieces that are on the floor are the beginning stages of some of the work that you see in the gallery today. The large latch hook pieces on one table. I have like 4 tables in my studio. Um, and it's the process. It's interesting because although a systematic worker, I'm also a bit of a messy worker. I guess it's almost okay to say that. But yeah, there's usually stuff everywhere. But I know where things are typically. My studio assistants often are like, you know, they love me, so they're kind to me, but we're often looking for things. But I'm usually able to put my finger on it. But this is like me working in my studio. And then the image to the right, I really wanted to kind of show you how process driven I am, right? So these are sequence beads that are found in one of my pieces where I'm really sitting there and sitting at my work table for hours, stringing sequins and beads together. And for me, that meditative process of doing the same gesture over time and how that grows um, in my work is very important to me. It's also important because I navigate anxiety quite a bit. And so even the repetition of latch hooking or the layering that I do and how everything is systematic actually helps to ease my anxiety, which is another reason why it's very important to me that I'm systematic in my work. And so the art not only becomes artifacts around the my concerns, right, or the things that I care about, but it also becomes a healing mechanism for me as well in that way. Um, the other beautiful thing about my process is that I take it everywhere, right? Because my anxiety never leaves me. My art never leaves me either, right? So this is me actually at my kitchen table. And I really wanted to show you this as well, because for me, it's not just about the notion of latch hooking or the exercise of latch hooking. It is also about this repetitious act, right? And so I'm not just latch hooking, I'm braiding, I'm weaving in some spots, I am, crocheting in other spots. It's about all of this handiwork that really makes the piece itself. A few other examples of my work. The piece to the left, I titled her Prom Queen. I thought it was very fitting. But you'll see here that I have began to actually sew sequins in the work itself. And you see, zip ties and pipe cleaners and tulle fabric. And I also like it is, it's a bit fun for me to go into a store or if someone is gifting me materials to kind of look and see what's unconventional there so that I can reimagine it in my work. So the really shiny pieces like at the top right or even found in the middle of the purple piece, Prom Queen, is actually Easter, like Easter basket grass, right? And so I'm interested in, again, in this idea of how to reimagine materials, but I'm also interested in like what we consume, right? And what happens when we consume so much and disregard so much, like what happens to our relationship with the earth? Um, so more of my work. And so I just want to kind of briefly talk about like the corners and the corner pieces. Um, so this idea of a corner, there's something about disregarded space and physical space and how like we don't pay attention to corners. And to me, it mirrors oftentimes how Black and Brown people are viewed in the world, right? How we are overlooked and disregarded. And so I play on that idea and I put things in corners to then kind of allow the viewer to then question themselves around what it means to disregard space. I'm also playing with the idea of uh, 3 dimensions and how to maybe think about my work 3 dimensionally. And so um, this is, just like a poof stool, but I'd like to create this body of work where I am recreating seating areas or space like couches and chairs as an homage to like my family in the sitting room that we would often go in to look at photo albums. And so I am working and ideating about that body of work as well. So this is like the start of that. And then again, another corner piece, right? So, that's really all I had. I want to make space for us to ask questions and for us to be in dialogue. And then, of course, if you want to reach out to me, feel free to email me. This is my Instagram handle, Brittney Boyd Bullock. You can find me there, and then you can also email me. And just quickly, some of the things that I'm working on, I'll stop sharing my screen now. Some of the things that are in the works for me, I am a part of a public art fellowship, and so I'm going to do my first public art piece here in the city at the University of Memphis come the fall. I have another exhibition, a group exhibition that will open up at the Tone Gallery here in July, which is in the Lamar and Airway Shopping Center. And yeah, I'm currently working on a film project as well as the production designer assistant. So I'm all over the place, but it's all good stuff. And I just look forward to continuing to expand my craft and continuing to be in dialogue, right, through my work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brittney. Can you hear me? I particularly enjoyed hearing your thoughts and your process. I think we all did. And I think that concept of surrender is going to stay with me for a while, and just the different ways that you interpreted that visually and as you talked us through it. I really appreciate that. I also misspoke earlier. Brittney is not one of our Memphis 2021 artists. Brittney has her entire show up at the Dixon in the Mallory at Wurtzburger. So please come see that show. And you may also see the Memphis 2021 show. There is one question in our chat, Brittney, so far. Julie wants to know if you knew the people, or do you know the people that you gave the 8x8 works to? What was that like?
Yeah, great question. So I knew some of them, not all of them. And I did this process through social media. So ultimately, I kind of put it out there on social media and said, I was funded to make this work. I want to give it away. I want to give it away, particularly to Black and Brown people. And so every day I'm going to post a video, and I'll you put in the comments that you're interested, and I'll put your name in a jar and I'll pull out names. And that is ultimately how I did it. Oftentimes there are people that I pulled out, I was like, oh, I know and love this person. Great. And then there were other times where I didn't. And I was just really, grateful to be able to do that, because what it also brought up for me too was who gets to collect, right? Who gets to collect art? And oftentimes those of us who are thinking about like collecting work, we're not thinking about those who can't, in some regard. And so I was really holding that question too, like who gets to collect? And given the capacity, whether it be financially or mentally, who gets to do that, right? Usually it is those who are rich and wealthy. And I really wanted to like flip that paradigm. I really wanted to like really question that, which is why I wanted to give the work away. And so I've been thinking about that process in and of itself, and I want to continue that. And so it might be some opportunities for me in the future to do that, to continue to give work away. But I really want to kind of continue to like push that on its head, this idea of who gets to collect and why.
Very cool. A couple more comments and questions have rolled in. Jamon Bullock wants to congratulate you on everything you're doing. Let you know how proud, challenging yourself and continuing to blossom. Now, Sharp wants to know if you have a favorite piece that's up in your show right now.
Mallory. It's so good to see you. Love you. So just real quick, I worked with Mallory before I worked with Julie, and so Mallory has a special place in my heart. But so favorite piece. I would say that my favorite piece in the work is what is on everything. So it's on the postcard. It's on I think it's on the invitation on the Dixon's website. It's the image of the little boy in the blue shirt. I gravitate to that piece because I see a lot of my son in him, although he's much older. And I really like the application of the materials in that piece and how position it itself. So that would be my favorite piece, I think, of the show.
Well, speaking of materials, Michael Baker addresses the layers that you discussed for us, how the new layer covers up the old layer, and the old can either be obscured or it can bleed through. And he says it's kind of like the piece is growing.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really like that idea. And also too, just like this notion of like what it means to peel away and to put on. And even just that gesture of pulling away and putting on, like extraction and adding, right? It's I'm super fascinated by it.
Well, we're fascinated by what you have right now in those layers. So we're grateful to you too. And thank you very much for being here. Next week, we will have another talk. It will be by one of our Memphis 2021 artists, and it's going to be a bilingual talk by Johanna Moscoso. And we will also have a talk at 2 this Sunday by another Memphis 2021 artist, Debbie Pacheco. And the link for both of these is up on Dixon.org if you go to our event calendar. We have one more question. Joanne has just put it in the chat. Thank you, Joanne. What type of movie will you be involved in?
Yeah, so it's an independent film here. It's actually a horror film. And I don't know if I can actually talk a whole lot about it, but it's a relatively small film. Yeah, I don't know if I can talk about it, but I'll tell you my role. There, I work within the art department, and so we have a production designer who kind of heads up the work and leads the work, and I work directly under him. And so it's a really interesting way of working, right? And I'm also interested in the idea of telling stories through film and cinema. And so it was a great opportunity to kind of explore that and get some experience. And the way film and cinema works, as I understand it, is it's about like not what you worked on, but like networking when you have a gig. And so my hope is that I'm able to kind of gain some experience in that and then start to even think about the idea of telling stories through cinema. So I'm excited for the opportunity. It's interesting. And it's also a fast project. So I think we start shooting on Sunday. And we're in pre-production now, which is when you kind of like, for the art department, you're gathering all your props, you're making the set, that kind of thing. So we're in the thick of that. But it's a challenge. So, and my time is limited. I don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm only working with them for a small amount of time during the day, but it's fun. It's fun to get the experience.
Well, we'll stay plugged in so we can find out more when more information becomes available. Lawrence Blackwell has a last question. Do you find that different generations receive bright colors differently?
Okay, wait, ask me that again.
So do you think that the different generations bright colors differently?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because when I think about my mother, right, who is all into like darker tones, more saturated, like darker hues. And, she grew up during like the civil rights era, right? And, so I do think that her experience there has a lot to do with color. So yeah, I mean, I think, so the psychology of color is super fascinating. And if you're interested, definitely check out Joseph Albers. There's a really great book that I have of his. And he talks about the psychology of color and what it means to like juxtapose color up against one another. So, but there's really interesting stuff, but there's also not a lot of research out about it because it's, I guess, hard to research. So when I find things that are associated with color and how color affects mood, I'm super interested. But researchers are also saying that, you know, they're questioning how credible it is, but I find it interesting.
It might be personal.
It might be. And, you know, I think maybe as you evolve, your color palette evolves as well, right? But for some reason, I cannot get away from brightly colored things. And it's funny because I don't wear typically brightly colored things, but my nails are usually bright and my artwork is usually bright.
Fun. Well, thanks again, Brittney. I think that we're probably at the, Kevin, you want to speak up? No, okay.
Hi,
Well,
Kevin.
that Kevin and Julie and everyone invites all of you, joins me in inviting you to come to the Dixon to see Brittney's show. Also to see Memphis 2021 and enjoy our gardens while we still have nice enough weather. Please consider joining the Dixon if you're not currently a member, and consider giving a gift of a gift membership if you know somebody with a special occasion coming up. Have a great afternoon, everyone. We hope to see you Sunday at the Talk at 2 and next Wednesday for our next artist.